Question: what makes a truly great film star? Answer: good looks, charisma, and a whole lot of weirdness. Few actors have enjoyed a career as long or as successful as that of Christopher Walken, who began his journey as a child star before finding even greater fame in adulthood.
Because every once in a while, the lion has to show the jackals who he is.
Walken is now legendary for his versatility, his charisma, and his unusual line deliveries, but he's also developed a reputation for world-class weirdness. During an appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live, David Spade recalled listening to Walken discuss the acting abilities of various animals on the set of Joe Dirt, and mice in particular.
They're good. You tell a mouse to walk up here, take a beat, and go left, and they do it. And I go, how? And he goes, I don't know.
Sean William Scott worked with Walken in The Rundown, meanwhile. On one occasion, he noticed that Walken seemed a little glum. Scott recalled,
"Oh, hey, Christopher Walken. I don't know why I always called him his full name, but it's like, Christopher Walken. Is
it's
okay?
Christopher Walken.
You seem sad." He goes, No. Well, maybe a little bit.
Walken confirmed that he was indeed feeling down. Apparently, it was his birthday and he hadn't received a cake, which Scott immediately offered to get him. He went on,
He's like, "I'm just kidding, it's not my birthday." He's like, "But I bet you right now if I told people they'd bring me out a cake." I'm like, "What?"
As Walken had predicted, Scott later witnessed the cast and crew singing happy birthday to him as he blew out the candles on his cake. Scott added,
And I walk by him and he's like, gives me a wink. I'm like, weirdo.
As the star of Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia, and Star Wars, Alec Guinness was one of Britain's greatest screen icons.
If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Classy, understated, and able to blend perfectly into any part, he was also the quintessential Englishman, on screen at least. Off-screen, Guinness was a bizarre control freak who wouldn't let anyone make their own decisions, and he spent every waking hour seeking to undermine his long-suffering wife. In an interview with The Telegraph, Guinness's biographer, Piers Paul Reed, revealed that nearly every meeting he'd had with Guinness over the years had been utterly bizarre. Most notably, Guinness loved to meet for meals, where he'd ask everyone at the table what they wanted to eat. The moment they replied, Guinness would declare that they wouldn't want that and order them something completely different. According to Reed, Guinness had an obsessively precise idea of how every interaction should go, and he refused to ever be contradicted. Guinness's home life was also odd. He had grown up with an absent father and an alcoholic mother, and his hatred of her in particular turned into a kind of reflexive misogyny. As an adult, this expressed itself in open resentment towards his wife, Marla, whom he considered stupid. Weirdly, Reed suggests that Guinness actually recognized his own cruelty and desperately tried to keep it bottled up, only to have it come seeping out regardless. Marla, for her part, seems to have decided to ignore her husband's oafishness. With a screen career spanning from the late 1940s until his death in 1991, Klaus Kinski was renowned for his intense performances, as well as his violent behavior. He became notorious for terrorizing directors and earning the hatred of crew members. One infamous incident occurred while filming Aguirre, The Wrath of God. When Kinski became so irritated by the noise being made by the crew, he fired a rifle at them, blowing off one man's finger. He was also famed for enraging Berlin theatergoers with his one-man show about the life of Jesus Christ, which invariably devolved into him exchanging insults with jeering audience members. Famously, Kinski was a frequent collaborator and occasional sworn enemy of Werner Herzog, who detailed the rocky relationship in his documentary My Best Fiend. Herzog recalled that Kinski once locked himself in a bathroom for 2 days and trashed it, to the point that what remained inside could be sifted through a tennis racket. He added, "I never thought anyone could rave for 48 hours. And these uneasy feelings were quite mutual, too." In his own memoir, Kinski wrote, "Herzog is a miserable, spiteful, envious, sadistic, insidious, backstabbing, blackmailing, cowardly person."
Have you met before?
No, they've just met.
Only on the battlefield. On the battlefield of life itself.
One possible explanation for Kinski's erratic behavior emerged in 2008, when German tabloids revealed that he'd spent 3 days in a psychiatric facility at the age of 26. Reportedly, doctors had offered a preliminary diagnosis of schizophrenia and labeled him a psychopath. Buster Keaton was famous for the spectacular stunts he performed in the silent era of cinema. Capturing these moments on film was no mean feat, however, and Keaton regularly risked life and limb in ways that most people would deem foolhardy at best. Perhaps the most famous of Keaton's stunts involved having the entire wall of a house fall on him, with only a precisely placed open window allowing him to walk away unharmed. The stunt was carefully planned, but there was no guarantee that things wouldn't go terribly wrong and leave him injured or worse. According to Hollywood lore, the cameraman filming the stunt looked away as it happened, while the director was off somewhere else entirely. Film critic Dana Stevens told NPR's Fresh Air, "I think the director did actually confirm years later that he was in fact off in his tent, in his office, praying that the stunt would go off." You know, people were fainting on the sidelines because it really was the most dangerous stunt he'd ever undertaken. To Keaton himself, though, all this was par for the course. In fact, he seems to have developed his daredevil nature as early as infancy. One famous story claims that baby Keaton fell down an entire flight of stairs while his horrified parents watched, only for him to bounce up unscathed as if nothing had happened. Film fans will remember Hedy Lamarr as a Hollywood beauty who lit up the screen in such films as Samson and Delilah and Algiers. Those who only knew her as a movie star, however, likely had no idea that her good looks were matched by a brilliant mind. While her peers would conclude a day of filming by carousing at trendy nightclubs, Lamarr would instead spend her evenings tinkering at the inventing table in her home. Historian Richard Rhodes, author of Hedy's Folly, told History, "Hedy had a drafting table and a whole wall full of engineering books. It was a serious hobby." In the early years of World War II, she met musical composer George Antheil, who also had a knack for inventing. Eager to contribute to the war effort, the two bonded and began working on a communications device in which a signal rapidly switched frequencies to prevent interception. They were awarded a patent, although the US military declined to use the system. It wasn't until after her death that Lamarr's frequency-hopping invention was recognized by the scientific community as having paved the way for today's wireless technology, including Bluetooth and GPS. Lamarr has since been posthumously dubbed the mother of Wi-Fi. Bette Davis was one of the last screen goddesses. Get on the wrong side of her, though, and she was liable to detonate with the force of 1,000 A-bombs.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Davis's mood could turn on a dime, too. Writing for Vanity Fair, producer William Fry once recalled meetings with the star that began well, only to end in the social equivalent of Armageddon. On one occasion, Davis and Fry were meeting the director Herschel Doherty for a meal when Doherty made the mistake of wagging his finger in Davis's face. As Fry tells it, Davis unleashed such a tirade on the director that she managed to clear out half the restaurant. Immediately afterwards, she snapped back to being her usual self like nothing had happened. Legendary as Davis's temper was, her obsessive attention to detail was almost equally notorious. When a dog needed to be cast in her film, A Stolen Life, she refused to let a casting director get involved, instead personally auditioning every mutt in Los Angeles. The dog didn't even have a huge role in the movie, it was only in one scene. Alas, Davis's efforts were wasted on that occasion, as her chosen dog was too scared of her to do any acting. W.C. Fields may have been an actor, but the misanthropic alcoholic jerk he played in many of his movies was anything but a character. In fact, the real-life Fields was just as moody, often as intoxicated, as he was on screen. Fields drank more or less continuously for his entire career. He was obsessed by the thought of being caught short without a drop, to the extent that he hoarded enough liquor in his attic to keep him going for 25 years. One version of the story holds that this was an insurance move in case Prohibition returned. Inevitably, though, all that drinking impacted heavily on his career. Even aside from his drinking, Fields was something of an eccentric. Later in life, he would demand $15,000 for each screenplay he wrote, and any producer foolish enough to stump up the cash would get some vague scrawlings on the back of an envelope, at best. He also liked to straight-up mess with people for fun. According to his old friend Groucho Marx, Fields would hide behind bushes on his front lawn and shoot at passers-by with a BB gun. As Marx once pointed out to Roger Ebert, today he'd probably be arrested. Jimmy Stewart may have had a mild-mannered screen persona, but in real life, he was a truly remarkable man. He flew a bomber over Europe in World War II when he was already famous, performing so well in combat that the French government awarded him the Croix de Guerre medal for his service during the liberation of France.
Young men of America, your future's in the sky.
He never let this go to his head, though. Stewart had it written into his Hollywood contracts that his war record could never be used to promote a movie. Perhaps the craziest bit of chutzpah greatness in Stewart's life, however, was when he became an international smuggler. In the 50s, Stewart was tasked with transporting the mummified hand of a Yeti from Nepal to the United Kingdom, which he accomplished by hiding it in his wife's lingerie. Notably, this was during a time when it seemed fairly possible that there was some kind of abominable snowman hiding somewhere in the Himalayas. A group of Nepalese monks was known to have a rumored Yeti hand in their possession, and Stewart, who was in India at the time, was considered the best person to smuggle it out for testing. Sadly, it turned out to be fake, but at least he got a good story out of it. To say Greta Garbo was a recluse would be something of an understatement. This was a woman who hated going out so much that she managed to miss her own wedding. Just about the only person she ever allowed into her home was Gaylord Hauser, who just happened to be a nutritionist with a sideline and crazy. Hauser convinced Garbo to spend decades following his dietary plans, and she became so obsessed with her supposed health benefits that she subjected herself to the kinds of meals that the UN would class as biological weapons. One involved eating nothing but raw yeast, with occasional treats of buttermilk. Another involved consuming only spinach for a full 3 weeks. Hauser liked to claim that following his diet plans would allow anyone to live to 100, and to be fair, both he and Garbo came close, dying at 89 and 84 respectively. There was no word, however, on whether they thought it had been remotely worth it. Tippi Hedren is best known to film fans for a starring role in Alfred Hitchcock's 1963 thriller The Birds. In that movie, Hedren does a stellar job of acting terrified of a load of birds, but it's fair to say that she's a whole lot braver in real life. For one thing, Hedren used to share her Hollywood home with a fully grown 400-pound male lion. This unlikely setup developed from Hedren's conservation work. She's long worked to help save and rescue big cats and has won a number of awards for her efforts. Hedren's lion Neil had the run of the house. He would even saunter through the living room when guests were visiting. At the time, Hedren was living with her teenage daughter Melanie Griffith, and every now and then she'd even let Griffith and Neil share a bed. Thankfully, Neil didn't maul Hedren, eat Griffith, or kill any guests. That said, neither woman got quite so lucky on the set of the 1981 movie Roar, which was directed by Hedren's husband, Noel Marshall. That production was so haphazard and dangerous that Hedren, Griffith, and a good few crew members were attacked by the lions used during filming. Hedren herself later admitted to Variety, "I don't know how he survived it. They shouldn't be pets, they're apex predators." Marlon Brando is widely regarded as the most talented actor of his generation, but he was also a world-class eccentric whose behavior became increasingly bizarre as he grew older.
Horror. Horror.
In his autobiography, Brando, Songs My Mother Taught Me, he wrote about the menagerie of unusual pets he'd owned over the years, ranging from electric eels to monkeys to an anteater named Chuck. But he was most fond of his pet raccoon Russell, who lived in his New York City apartment when he was an up-and-coming actor and who once managed to dismantle Brando's wristwatch, right down to the springs. Stories about Brando's strange exploits became legendary in Hollywood. For example, after the death of Wally Cox, he regularly conducted conversations with his friend's cremated remains. It's also been claimed that while filming the 1976 western The Missouri Breaks, Brando grabbed a frog from a stream, took a bite out of it, and tossed it back into the water. There have also been various anecdotes about Brando's refusal to learn his lines, instead having them written on notes hidden on the set or even taped to his co-stars. Some of his strangest on-set moments came while making 1996's The Island of Dr. Moreau. He insisted his character, the titular mad scientist, wear an ice bucket as a hat, and pushed for a twist ending in which Dr. Moreau turns out to be a dolphin. Canadian actor Leslie Nielsen launched his career as a dramatic actor during television's so-called Golden Age, and he appeared on countless TV shows throughout the early 50s. He then went on to star in the 1956 sci-fi classic Forbidden Planet, becoming a stalwart to both TV and film throughout the 60s and 70s. After that, he became an icon in the world of comedy, stealing the show in movies such as Airplane and The Naked Gun, as well as the TV series Police Squad.
Nothing to see here! Please disperse! Nothing to see here!
During his newfound life as a funny man, Nielsen enjoyed bringing his beloved handy gas device with him to interviews, a small item he held in his hand that produced a sound akin to that of passing wind. Most famously used during an interview with Conan O'Brien, Nielsen went on to deploy his so-called fart machine during numerous TV interviews over the years.
I will do almost anything I can for a laugh.
In fact, Nielsen once confirmed that he brought it with him literally everywhere, and particularly enjoyed unleashing it in crowded elevators. Along with his siblings Lionel and Ethel, John Barrymore was a part of one of Hollywood's first acting dynasties. While modern movie fans will know him as the grandfather of Drew Barrymore, he was also once seen as one of the finest actors of his generation. And while Barrymore moved from the stage to the screen, the money he earned in Hollywood gave him the opportunity to indulge both his enormous appetites and his many eccentricities. That was evident in his lavish mansion, which contained his own personal opium den, an aviary housing 500 birds, and a collection of strange artifacts, including shrunken heads and a totem pole stolen from a village in Alaska. Film star Errol Flynn was a close friend of Barrymore. In his memoir, he wrote that Barrymore believed it was a waste of time going to the bathroom if there was a window nearby. Apparently, the actor's habit of urinating out of one specific window had over time stripped all the varnish from the wooden sill. When Flynn pointed this out, asking his friend to find an alternative way to answer nature's call, Barrymore took aim at Flynn's fireplace. Flynn wrote, "The smell through the room was atrocious." Following her breakout in 1967's Bonnie and Clyde, Faye Dunaway went on to become one of the biggest movie stars of the 70s, appearing in such critically acclaimed box office hits as The Thomas Crown Affair, Chinatown, and Network. As Dunaway's stardom grew, though, so did reports that she was difficult to work with. Eventually, stranger stories began to emerge. There was, for example, her clash with Chinatown co-star Jack Nicholson, who began referring to her as the dreaded Dunaway.
Forget
get it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
The film's director, Roman Polanski, felt similarly. He once described her to Rolling Stone as a gigantic pain in the ass, adding, "You have, I guarantee, never seen such certifiable proof of craziness." Even Hollywood legend Bette Davis couldn't muster anything positive to say when, during an appearance on The Tonight Show, she declared,
"She's very unprofessional.
I see.
Difficult woman, really."
One peculiar tale about Dunaway occurred in 2016 when she attended a gala at the Cannes Film Festival. When dinner was served, she pulled a small kitchen scale from a paper bag and began weighing her food. A rep for the actor attempted to offer an explanation, telling the Daily Mail, "Ms. Dunaway has always taken care of her diet and general well-being. What may be considered slightly eccentric is part of her charm." It's no secret that drug use was rife in Hollywood during the 60s and 70s, but few actors indulged with as much gusto as Dennis Hopper. As the years passed, Hopper's addictions only worsened. In an interview with Cigar Aficionado, he once said, "I was drinking a half-gallon of rum with a fifth of rum on the side in case I ran out, 28 beers a day, and 3 grams of cocaine just to keep me moving around." That level of substance abuse left him in a perpetually altered state, which manifested itself in some seriously strange behavior, as well as paranoia. By the early 80s, Hopper was far gone. Hopper's friend Ron Davis told Trend magazine, "He was hardcore, he went insane." Davis recalled watching Hopper on the roof of his home firing a gun at helicopters only he could see. Eventually, the actor came to believe that World War III was imminent. Fearing the world was about to be consumed by nuclear fire, he fled to Mexico, where he ran off into a jungle stark naked. When authorities finally captured him and stuck him on a flight back to the States, he began to hallucinate a fire on the plane and tried to force his way out mid-flight. And this was just one of many, many stories fueled by Hopper's drug use. Thankfully, though, he ended up getting sober in the mid-80s, after which he went on to make some of his finest movies. Tallulah Bankhead found fame on the London theater scene before heading off to Hollywood, and while she never quite enjoyed the level of stardom that she dreamed, she was at least dead set on having a good time. Bankhead demonstrated a flair for exhibitionism, and she soon earned a reputation for shedding her clothes at parties. She was also known to leave her bathroom door open whenever nature called, and was loath to wear any underwear. That created something of a scandal when she went commando while performing in a play, which resulted in so many audience members complaining that Actors Equity issued an edict ordering her to wear underwear whenever she appeared on stage. Stephanie Powers, who co-starred with Bankhead in the 1965 film Die, Die, My Darling, certainly got to know that side of her. She said, "She was not only a performer, but she was a bit of an exhibitionist." Powers recalled her surprise when Bankhead once summoned her to her dressing room, explaining, "And frequently she might be sitting naked on the toilet. This was not necessarily an attractive sight, but it was her way. She loved shock value." If you've ever seen a film starring Peter Lorre, you might have noticed that his eyes look a little strange, almost droopy, as if he's about to fall asleep.
Come along. I'll see that nothing happens to you.
Lorre leveraged his looks into a successful career playing oddballs and villains, but his distinctive expression may have had less to do with genetics and more to do with substance abuse. That's because Lorre spent his entire career suffering from morphine addiction. Lorre's issues began long before he ever graced a Hollywood screen, following an appendix operation in his native Europe. His doctors kept him so full of morphine after the operation that he quickly became addicted. By the time he appeared as a serial killer in Fritz Lang's disturbing German thriller M, Lorre's drug use was so well known that his friends joked that the M stood for morphine. Not much changed when he made the move to Hollywood, where he also began abusing prescription pills and cough medicine. For long stretches of his career, Lorre was even choosing roles based on how they might fit around his rampant drug use. For example, he took the part of Mr. Moto in an 8-film series partly because he needed money for drugs, but also because they'd let him use them in his trailer. In other instances, entire films were shot with Lorre so intoxicated that he could barely climb the stairs. Ralph Richardson and Laurence Olivier dominated the stage and screen during the 20th century, and both men are often counted among the finest actors Britain ever produced. Yet their personal relationship seems like it was lifted straight out of a slapstick comedy. For example, Richardson once tried to impress Olivier and his wife, Vivien Leigh, by surprising them with a fireworks display in their garden at one of their parties. When he fired the first rocket, however, it unexpectedly changed paths and exploded in her drawing room, terrifying guests and destroying furniture. Leigh was not amused, obviously, and she banned Richardson from ever setting foot in their home again. This ban was eventually lifted several years later, though, and so Richardson paid them another visit, and that turned out to be an even bigger disaster. While Richardson was admiring some medieval frescoes in the attic, he stepped off a beam in order to get a closer view, only to lose his footing and crash right through their bedroom ceiling. And Richardson's misadventures with the Olivier Leigh family didn't end there either. On another occasion, Olivier asked Richardson to call his wife and let her know he'd be late for dinner. Richardson instead called Olivier's ex-wife, Jill Esmond, to tell her, "Larry says not to worry, he'll be home in 20 minutes.
In 1960, the editors at Good Housekeeping magazine got a strange call. Cary Grant, the suave, sophisticated film star who almost never gave interviews, was on the line and wanted to talk about the magnificent amount of LSD he'd dropped. Yup, plagued by personal demons, Grant finally found peace when his third wife introduced him to the wonders of acid, which he dropped over 100 times between 1958 and 1961. And he wanted everyone to experience the same wonderful benefit. So he went on a campaign to promote the benefits of LSD, which, according to the biography Cary Grant, A Touch of Elegance, included Grant saying things like, "It releases inhibition. You know, we are all unconsciously holding our anus. In one LSD dream, I all over the rug and all over the floor. Another time, I imagined myself as a giant penis launching off from the earth like a spaceship." Most people who get nose jobs want to make their nose smaller, but legendary writer, director, and actor Orson Welles was obsessed with making his nose larger. He thought his real nose was too small for his round face, so in every movie, he had a fake nose made. And as his career went along, those noses got bigger and bigger and bigger. When he finished a film, Welles kept his noses, named them, and stored them in his Hollywood home, where he would occasionally take them out at parties and perform magic tricks with them. That's the sort of crazy you get away with when you've directed the best film ever made. The star who gave us Dr. Strangelove and Inspector Clouseau wasn't just a weirdo. He was apparently also such a monumental butthead that few could stand to be around him. Peter Sellers would have screaming meltdown tantrums on set. He'd freak out at his wives, smash crockery, and threaten them with his shotgun. He'd even get low-level people fired on movies as a way of venting his frustrations against people like producers and directors who were more powerful than he was. He was also profoundly superstitious. So when director Vittorio De Sica told him the color purple represented death, Sellers took it way too literally. According to the biography Mr. Strangelove, Sellers became convinced the color purple could kill. He refused to be in rooms with it and would have screaming tantrums if he came into contact with it. Elizabeth Taylor's hell-raising is so infamous that her private life was publicly denounced by the Vatican. Over her lifetime, she married 8 times, had endless affairs, and took great pride in the offense she caused. Sometimes her behavior was truly outrageous. After marrying and divorcing Richard Burton twice, Taylor was so upset that she got engaged just to spite him. While working on the play Private Lives, Taylor and Burton brought out the worst in each other. They separately turned up drunk, they broke character, they skipped performances. When Taylor missed a show, Burton got fed up, went to Vegas, and married Sally Hay. When Taylor heard the news, she was so furious, she announced her engagement to Victor Luna, upstaging Burton. Not that she hated her ex-husband. Later in life, Taylor claimed they would have married a third time if only Burton hadn't died. The best way to describe Katharine Hepburn is fiercely independent. She lived as if married with both women and men, all while acting like it was no big deal. Part of that, though, was that she had plausible deniability, as according to the book Kate, the woman who was Katharine Hepburn, the famed actress not only didn't like physical intimacy, she hated nudity to the point where she would walk out on a film if there was a scene showing someone naked. So why did Hepburn loathe nudity and physical romance so much? According to a college friend, she tried intercourse once and, quote, just didn't like it. Fair enough. They say that cleanliness is next to godliness, but matinee idol Clark Gable took it to a whole new level. According to Warren G. Harris's biography of Gable, the star shaved his chest and armpits because he didn't like sweating. He also didn't like baths because it meant soaking in your own dirty water. So he always showered, even carrying his own portable shower around with him when he was in the Army. Considering his obsession with hygiene, it's ironic that Gable's Gone with the Wind co-star Vivien Leigh later publicly called him out for having bad breath. Still, no matter what people said about his weird ways, he always had the perfect comeback.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.